Karen's eyes narrowed as she glared at the ice cream truck parked on her street. "This is a residential area," she snapped. "You're loitering." The driver, Tiffany, stared back in disbelief. "Ma'am, I'm filming a scene for Netflix. This is my job." Karen's lips tightened. "We'll see about that." Tiffany gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. She couldn't believe the nerve of this woman, this Karen, as the internet had dubbed her type. All Tiffany was trying to do was her job. Film a scene for a new Netflix show about the trials and tribulations of an ice cream truck driver. But this entitled homeowner was having none of it. "I'm going to call the police if you don't move this truck immediately," Karen hissed, her voice dripping with venom. Tiffany took a deep breath, trying to keep her cool. "Ma'am, I'd assure you I am not loitering. I'm on a professional film shoot. We have permits and everything." She gestured to the crew members bustling around the truck, setting up equipment. Karen's eyes narrowed to slits. "I don't care what you say. This is my neighborhood, and I won't have some ice cream peddler disrupting the peace." She whipped out her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. Tiffany's heart sank. She knew exactly what was coming. A barrage of angry calls to the production company, the police, and anyone else who would listen to her petty complaints. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered a Karen, and it likely wouldn't be the last. As Karen spoke in a hushed, furious tone into her phone, Tiffany's co-worker, a young PA named Jamal, approached her. "Hey, Tiff, what's going on?" he asked, concern etched on his face. Tiffany quickly filled him in, and Jamal's expression darkened. "Aw, man, not again. I'll go talk to her, see if I can smooth things over." But before Jamal could even take a step, Karen had whirled around, her gaze fixed on him. "And who are you?" she demanded. Jamal straightened his shoulders, trying to appear calm and professional. "Ma'am, I'm part of the film crew. We have all the necessary permits and approvals to be here. I'd be happy to show you the paperwork if—" "I don't want to see any paperwork," Karen interrupted, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. "This is my neighborhood, and I won't have you people disrupting it. Now get that truck out of here, or I'll make sure you never work in this town again." Tiffany watched as Jamal's face fell, his confident demeanor crumbling in the face of Karen's relentless onslaught. She knew she had to do something, but what? Arguing with this woman was like trying to reason with a brick wall. Just then, a familiar face emerged from the ice cream truck. It was the director, a seasoned veteran named Michael, who had worked on some of the biggest blockbusters in Hollywood. He strode over to Karen, his expression stern. "Ma'am, I'm the director of this production, and I can assure you that we have every right to be here. We've gone through all the proper channels and obtained the necessary permits. Now, I'd appreciate it if you refrain from disrupting my crew and allow us to do our job." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, her face turning a deep shade of red. Tiffany couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as the director stood his ground, refusing to back down to her demands. But she knew this was only the beginning. The battle with Karen had just begun, and Tiffany had a feeling it was going to get a whole lot worse before it got better. The standoff between Karen and the film crew continued to escalate. Karen's face flushed with anger as she glared at Michael, the director, refusing to back down. "I don't care what kind of permits you have," she spat. "This is my neighborhood, and I won't have some Hollywood production taking over our streets. You need to pack up and leave right now." Michael's brow furrowed, and he crossed his arms over his chest. "Ma'am, I understand your concerns, but we have every right to be here. We're not disrupting anything. We're simply trying to do our job. Now, if you have a problem with that, I suggest you take it up with the proper authorities." Karen's eyes narrowed, and Tiffany could see the wheels turning in her mind. "Oh, believe me, I will," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "I'm going to make sure every single one of you is removed from this neighborhood, and that none of you ever work in this town again." With that, she turned on her heel and stormed off, leaving the crew in a stunned silence. Tiffany glanced at Jamal, who looked like he was about to be sick. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice trembling. Michael let out a heavy sigh. "We keep doing our job. We've got a scene to film, and we're not going to let some entitled homeowner stop us." The crew sprang back into action, and Tiffany took her place behind the wheel of the ice cream truck. As the cameras rolled, she tried to focus on her performance, but her mind kept drifting back to Karen and her threats. Just as they were wrapping up the scene, a familiar sound reached Tiffany's ears, the wail of police sirens. Her heart sank as she watched a squad car pull up, and 2 officers stepped out. "This is not good," Jamal murmured, his face pale. The officers approached the crew, their expressions stern. "We've received a complaint about a disturbance in the neighborhood," one of them said, his gaze sweeping over the group. Michael stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Officers, I can assure you that we are not causing any disturbance. We are a professional film crew, and we have all the necessary permits to be here." The officers exchanged a glance, and Tiffany could see the doubt in their eyes. Just then, a familiar figure came striding up the street. It was Karen, a triumphant smile on her face. "Officers, thank you for coming," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "These people are trespassing on our private property and disrupting the peace of our neighborhood. I demand that you remove them immediately." Tiffany felt a surge of anger as she watched Karen manipulate the situation, using her position as a homeowner to turn the officers against them. She knew that they had done nothing wrong, but in the face of Karen's relentless accusations, it was going to be an uphill battle. The officers turned to Michael, their expressions grave. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you and your crew to leave the premises. We've received a formal complaint, and we have to investigate." Michael opened his mouth to protest, but Tiffany knew it was no use. Karen had won this round, and the consequences were about to be severe. As the crew began packing up their equipment, Tiffany couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. She knew that this was just the beginning, and that the battle with Karen was far from over. The crew scrambled to pack up their equipment as the police officers watched, their expressions unreadable. Tiffany could feel the tension in the air as they loaded the last of the filming gear into the trucks. Michael approached the officers, his brow furrowed in frustration. "Officers, I can assure you that we have done nothing wrong. We have all the necessary permits to film in this neighborhood." One of the officers, a tall, stern-faced man, shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir, but we have to follow up on the complaint we received. We don't have a choice in the matter." Tiffany could see the disappointment and anger in Michael's eyes, but he knew there was no point in arguing further. With a resigned sigh, he turned to the crew and gestured for them to leave. As the trucks pulled away, Tiffany couldn't help but glance back at Karen, who was standing on her porch, a triumphant smile on her face. It was clear that she had won this round, and Tiffany knew that the battle was far from over. The crew returned to their production office, their mood somber. Michael paced back and forth, his hands clenched at his sides. "I can't believe this is happening," he muttered, his voice laced with frustration. "We had every right to be there, and that woman just waltzed in and got us kicked out." Jamal, who had been uncharacteristically quiet during the drive back, finally spoke up. "What are we going to do now? We need that location for the scene, and the last thing we can afford is to lose more time." Michael paused, his brow furrowed in thought. "We're not going to let this woman win. We're going to fight back, and we're going to do it in a way that she'll never see coming." The crew exchanged a series of puzzled glances, but Tiffany could see the determination in Michael's eyes. She knew that he was not the kind of man to back down easily, and she had a feeling that he had a plan up his sleeve. Over the next few days, the crew worked tirelessly to put together a new strategy. They pored over legal documents, researched local ordinances, and reached out to community leaders for support. Tiffany could see the determination in their eyes and she knew that they were not going to let Karen win without a fight. Finally, the plan was in place, and the crew returned to the neighborhood, this time armed with a stack of paperwork and a sense of purpose. As they approached the street, they could see Karen standing on her porch, her arms crossed over her chest. But this time, she was not alone. She was flanked by a group of her neighbors, all of whom looked equally hostile. Michael stepped forward, his expression calm and collected. "Ma'am, I have some important information for you and your neighbors." Karen's eyes narrowed, and she opened her mouth to speak, but Michael raised his hand, silencing her. "This neighborhood is zoned for commercial use, which means that we have every right to film here. In fact, we've just received approval from the city to use this location for the next 3 weeks." The color drained from Karen's face, and her neighbors exchanged a series of worried glances. Tiffany couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction as she watched the tables turn. This was just the beginning of the battle, but Tiffany knew that they were finally on the right track. They were no longer playing by Karen's rules, and she had a feeling that this was going to be a fight she would never forget. Karen's face contorted with rage as Michael delivered the news. Her neighbors behind her shifted uncomfortably, and Tiffany could see the doubt creeping into their expressions. "That can't be right," Karen sputtered, her voice trembling with anger. "This is a residential neighborhood, and you have no business being here." Michael remained calm, his expression unwavering. "I can assure you, ma'am, that we have followed all the proper procedures and obtained the necessary permits from the city. We are well within our rights to film here, and we intend to do so for the next 3 weeks." Karen turned to her neighbors, her eyes wild. "Did you all hear that? They're trying to take over our neighborhood," she cried, her voice rising to a shrill pitch. The neighbors murmured and exchanged uneasy glances, but no one stepped forward to join Karen's tirade. Tiffany could see that they were beginning to question her motives, and she felt a surge of hope. Michael seized the opportunity. "If any of you have concerns about our presence here, I'd be more than happy to discuss them with you. We're not trying to cause any trouble. We're simply trying to do our jobs. But I can understand the disruption this may cause, and we're willing to work with you to find a solution." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red as she realized that her neighbors were not rallying to her cause. "This is unacceptable," she shrieked. "I won't stand for this, and neither will the rest of the neighborhood." With that, she stormed back into her house, slamming the door behind her. The neighbors shuffled uncomfortably, glancing at each other and at the film crew, unsure of what to do next. Tiffany watched as Michael approached one of the neighbors, a friendly older woman, and struck up a conversation. She could see the woman's expression softening as Michael explained their plans and sought to address her concerns. As the rest of the crew began setting up their equipment, Tiffany couldn't help but feel a sense of cautious optimism. They had managed to turn the tables on Karen, and she was no longer the undisputed ruler of the neighborhood. But Tiffany knew that the battle was far from over. Karen was not the kind of person to give up easily, and she had a feeling that she would be back, ready to fight with every ounce of her being. Over the next few days, the film crew continued to work diligently, navigating the delicate balance of maintaining a positive relationship with the neighbors while standing firm against Karen's relentless onslaught. Tiffany watched as Michael and the rest of the crew went out of their way to address the concerns of the residents, offering to adjust their filming schedule and even providing free ice cream to the children in the neighborhood. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The neighbors, who had once been wary and suspicious of the film crew, started to warm up to them, even offering to help with the production in small ways. But just when Tiffany thought they had weathered the worst of the storm, a new threat emerged, one that would test the crew's resolve and their ability to stand together in the face of adversity. Tiffany's heart sank as she read the email that had just arrived in her inbox. It was from the production company's legal team, and the news was not good. "We've received a cease and desist order from the Neighborhood Homeowners Association," the email stated. "They are claiming that our film production is in violation of local zoning laws and is disrupting the peace of the community. Tiffany's stomach twisted into knots as she realized that Karen had not given up her fight. In fact, she had managed to rally the rest of the homeowners association to her cause, and now they were wielding the full force of the law against the film crew. She quickly forwarded the email to Michael, who let out a frustrated sigh as he read the contents. "I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't think they'd stoop this low," he muttered, his brow furrowed with concern. The crew gathered around Michael as he relayed the news, their faces etched with worry. Jamal, who had been the most enthusiastic about the project, spoke up first. "What are we going to do? We can't just pack up and leave. We've invested too much time and money into this production." Michael's expression hardened with determination. "We're not going anywhere. We have the permits and the rights to be here, and we're not going to let some petty homeowners association bully us out of this neighborhood." He turned to the rest of the crew, his voice taking on a commanding tone. "We're going to fight this, and we're going to win, but we're going to do it the right way, by following the law and playing by the rules." Tiffany could see the resolve in her colleagues' faces as they nodded in agreement. They had come too far to let Karen and her neighbors win without a fight. Over the next few days, the crew worked tirelessly, poring over legal documents and reaching out to local officials for support. Tiffany found herself spending countless hours on the phone, negotiating with the homeowners association and trying to find a compromise that would allow them to continue filming. But Karen and her cohorts were relentless, and they refused to budge an inch. Tiffany could feel the tension mounting as the deadline for the cease and desist order drew closer, and she knew that they were running out of time. Finally, in a last-ditch effort, Michael arranged a meeting with the homeowners association, hoping to find a way to resolve the conflict. Tiffany held her breath as she watched him make his case, laying out the legal and practical reasons why the film crew should be allowed to continue their work. To her surprise, the homeowners association seemed to be listening, until Karen stepped forward, her face twisted with rage. "We will not be bullied by these Hollywood elites," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "This is our neighborhood, and we won't allow them to trample all over it." Tiffany could see the other members of the association wavering, their expressions uncertain. She knew that they were on the verge of caving to Karen's demands, and that the film crew's fate hung in the balance. As the meeting descended into chaos, Tiffany couldn't help but wonder if they had finally met their match in Karen and her relentless crusade to preserve her neighborhood. The tension in the room was palpable as Karen continued her tirade against the film crew. Tiffany watched with bated breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that they were on the verge of losing everything, and she couldn't bear the thought of having to walk away from this project. Just as it seemed like the homeowners association was about to cave to Karen's demands, a new voice suddenly cut through the chaos. "Excuse me, but I'd like to have a word." All eyes turned towards the back of the room, where a tall, well-dressed man stood. Tiffany recognized him immediately. It was the mayor of the city, a respected figure who had been a vocal supporter of the local film industry. "I've been made aware of the situation here," the mayor said, his voice calm and measured. "And I have to say, I'm deeply concerned about the actions being taken by the homeowners association." Karen's face flushed with anger, but the mayor raised a hand, silencing her. Now, let's not jump to any conclusions. I've reviewed the permits and the zoning laws, and I can say with certainty that the film crew is well within their rights to be here." Tiffany watched as the color drained from Karen's face, and she felt a surge of relief wash over her. The mayor had just thrown a lifeline to the crew, and she knew that they couldn't let it go to waste. Furthermore, the mayor continued, "I'd like to remind the homeowners association that we have a thriving film industry in this city, and it's something that we should be supporting, not hindering." He turned to Michael, his expression warm. "I apologize for the trouble you've had to endure, and I want to assure you that the city is fully behind your production. If there's anything we can do to help, please don't hesitate to let me know." Michael nodded gratefully, a relieved smile spreading across his face. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate your support more than you know." Karen, her face contorted with rage, opened her mouth to protest, but the mayor cut her off. Now, Karen, let's not make this any more difficult than it needs to be. I'd suggest that you and your fellow homeowners find a way to work with the film crew, rather than against them." With that, the mayor turned and left the room, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Tiffany could see the defeat in Karen's eyes, and she knew that they had finally won. As the Homeowners Association reluctantly agreed to allow the film crew to continue their work, Tiffany let out a sigh of relief. They had weathered the storm, and they had emerged victorious. But she knew that the battle was far from over. Karen was not the kind of person to accept defeat gracefully, and Tiffany had a feeling that she would be back, ready to fight another day. For now, though, Tiffany was content to savor their victory. They had stood up to Karen and her relentless crusade, and they had come out on top. And as she watched the crew begin to set up their equipment once again, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. This was just the beginning, she knew. There would be more battles to fight, more Karens to confront. But Tiffany was ready. She was more determined than ever to see this project through to the end, no matter what obstacles stood in their way. Over the next few weeks, the film crew continued their work in the neighborhood, navigating the delicate balance between maintaining good relations with the residents and standing firm against Karen's constant attempts to disrupt their operations. Tiffany marveled at the resilience and professionalism of her colleagues, who refused to be cowed by Karen's relentless bullying. Michael, in particular, seemed to thrive in the face of adversity, using his calm and measured approach to win over even the most skeptical of the homeowners. As the production progressed, Tiffany noticed a gradual shift in the attitude of the neighborhood. What had once been a tense and hostile environment slowly began to transform into one of cautious acceptance, and even, in some cases, enthusiasm. The crew made a concerted effort to be good neighbors, volunteering their time and resources to local community events and offering free ice cream to the children. Slowly but surely, the residents began to see them not as outsiders, but as valued members of the community. Tiffany couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as she watched this transformation unfold. They had fought hard for their right to be here, and they had emerged victorious. But more than that, they had managed to win over the hearts and minds of the people they had once been at odds with. However, just when Tiffany thought they had finally turned the corner, a new crisis emerged, one that threatened to undo all of their hard-won progress. It started with a series of anonymous complaints to the city's code enforcement department, alleging various violations by the film crew. Suddenly, the production was inundated with inspections and citations, each one seemingly more petty and vindictive than the last. Tiffany could see the frustration and exhaustion written on her colleagues' faces as they scrambled to address these new challenges. And at the center of it all, she knew, was Karen, her relentless crusade to drive the film crew out of her neighborhood, reaching new heights. As the pressure mounted, tempers began to flare. Tiffany watched as Michael and Karen engaged in a heated argument in the middle of the street, their voices echoing through the neighborhood. The residents, once so supportive, began to murmur and shift uncomfortably, caught in the crossfire of this escalating conflict. Tiffany knew that they were on the verge of losing everything they had worked so hard to build. The production was in jeopardy, their relationships with the community were fraying, and the emotional toll was becoming unbearable. But just when all seemed lost, a surprising twist of fate intervened. It happened during a routine inspection by the city's code enforcement officers. As they combed through the production's paperwork and permits, they made a startling discovery. Karen, in her zeal to drive the crew out, had inadvertently violated several of the neighborhood's own bylaws and zoning regulations. Tiffany watched with a mixture of shock and satisfaction as the officers confronted Karen, informing her that she was the one who was in violation, not the film crew. The woman's face turned a deep shade of crimson as she realized that her plan had backfired, and that she was now the one facing potential fines and legal action. In the end, the film crew emerged victorious, their hard-won progress and relationships with the community intact. And as Tiffany looked around at her colleagues, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. They had weathered the storm, and they had emerged stronger for it. As the final day of filming drew to a close, Tiffany couldn't help but feel a bittersweet mix of emotions. On one hand, she was relieved that the ordeal with Karen and the homeowners association was finally over. But on the other, she couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness at the thought of leaving the neighborhood behind. Over the past several weeks, Tiffany had grown to love the community and the people who lived there. She had watched as the once hostile environment had slowly transformed into a welcoming and supportive one, with the residents embracing the film crew as their own. As the crew gathered for one final wrap-up meeting, Tiffany couldn't help but reflect on all that they had accomplished. They had faced seemingly insurmountable odds, battling against a relentless and entitled homeowner who had seemed determined to drive them out. But through their perseverance, their professionalism, and their genuine commitment to the community, they had emerged victorious. Michael, the director, stood before the crew, a proud smile on his face. "I just want to thank all of you for the incredible work you've done over the past few weeks," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I know it hasn't been easy, but you've all proven yourselves to be true champions. And not just in the world of filmmaking, but in the world of community engagement and standing up for what's right." The crew erupted into thunderous applause, and Tiffany felt a swell of pride as she joined in. They had come together as a team, and they had overcome every obstacle that had been thrown their way. But as the cheers died down, Michael's expression turned serious. "Now, I know that our battle with Karen and the Homeowners Association isn't over. We may have won this round, but I have a feeling that she's not going to give up that easily." Tiffany nodded in agreement, her stomach twisting with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She knew that Karen was not the kind of person to simply accept defeat, and she had a feeling that the woman would be back, ready to fight another day. "But," Michael continued, his voice filled with determination, "we're not going to back down. We're going to continue to fight for our right to be here, and we're going to do it in a way that honors the community we've come to love." The crew erupted into cheers once more, and Tiffany couldn't help but join in. They had come so far, and they weren't about to let Karen or anyone else take that away from them. As the crew began to pack up their equipment, Tiffany found herself drawn to the ice cream truck, the very symbol of the conflict that had brought them to this neighborhood in the first place. She ran her hand along the smooth, colorful surface, a bittersweet smile on her face. Just then, she heard a familiar voice behind her. "Hey, Tiff, you ready to go?" She turned to see Jamal, his expression one of both relief and excitement. "Yeah, I'm ready," she replied, her voice soft. "But I'm going to miss this place, you know." Jamal nodded, his own face reflecting a similar sentiment. "Me too. But hey, who knows? Maybe we'll be back someday to finish the fight." Tiffany couldn't help but chuckle at that. "I have a feeling you're right," she said, her gaze drifting back to the ice cream truck. "And when we do, we'll be ready." With that, she turned and followed Jamal to the waiting crew, her heart filled with a sense of purpose and determination. They had won this battle, but the war with Karen was far from over, and she couldn't wait to see what the future held.